Hi everybody and welcome to the channel. I am Richard. I hope that you are ready to head out to sea again and to bring a shovel, because we are gonna hit the sails and find that island that marks the spot. That's right, we're going out to find a treasure in Scurvy Dice. This game is from Firelock Games. It's from 2 to 4 players. It's about 15 to 30 minutes, and it's a dice game where you roll some dice to upgrade your ship and get to the treasure before the other players. In this video, I'm going to show you an overview of it. I'm going to go through how to play it, so let's take a look at it. So this is the setup of the game. You have the map in the middle of the playing area. This is quite cool because this is actually fabric. So you place that in the middle and then you hand out 10 of the dice to each player. These are called the ship dice, and there's different symbols on them that you use to build your ship. I'm gonna show you that in a minute. Then we have the treasure dice. These are the ones with the coin symbol and the skull symbol. There should be 3 dice plus the amount of players. This is a 3-player game, so we have 3 dice plus 3 players. That's 6 dice. Then we also should pick up a little ship here and put in the starting area that is up here. And this is optional, but you can also choose a captain for your ship. I am Mr. Blackbeard here. And they all have different kinds of abilities that will help you in your gameplay. This one, for example, steal 1 dice from each ship you hit this phase. Set aside these dice until the refit phase. You may roll these stolen dice and add them to your ship during the refit phase. Once a new treasure hunt begins, return the dice to the original players. Like I said, it's optional, and if you're new in this game, you probably should wait with this to a later game. Or throw them in and see what happens. Now we need to figure out who's the first player, also called Scurvy Dog in this game. The first player is the player who was on a boat last. And since I'm alone, I guess I'm the first player. Now what I should do is I should take up the treasure dice and I should give them a good roll. Once I've done that, I take all the dice with a coin symbol and place them up here on Parrot Island. The ones with skulls on them are gonna be placed on Isla de Murta. Before we head out to the open waters, we need to build our ships. And as you can see on these ship dice, there's a bunch of different symbols on them. The sails here, the sail symbols, represent 2 different things. You have sails, where this is your ship's speed and determine who goes first in the following phases. Then the other ship symbol represents the hull. This is your ship's defense and capacities to store treasures and loot. Then we have the cannon. These represent the number of shots you can fire during the cannon phase. The sword represents the crews, and this represents your strength during melee battles and the capacity to carry treasures, dice back to the ship during the loot phase. Then we have the parrot, the cute little parrot. This one can be changed to any phase during the ship building phase. So you can use a single parrot to keep on the ship and can be changed to a crew cannon permanently in the beginning of the phases 2, 3 and 4. Parrots represent your ship's ability to adapt, so use them wisely. So before we start our game, we need to roll the ship dice, all 10 of them, to build our ship. Each player can re-roll any amount of dice once during this step. And remember that the ships represent the speed and the hull. But now we have rolled, so we can start to build our ship. This is what your ship could look like. I have 3 ships down here representing my hull, giving me a pretty strong ship. I have 2 swords representing my melee attacks, my crew. I only have 1 cannon, so I don't have that much firepower, but I have 3 sails, which gives me a lot of speed. And I kept 1 parrot. Remember that you can change this parrot to a cannon or crew during your gameplay in phases 2, 3 or 4. But you can only keep 1. So I will use that one later in a later phase. So once we have built our ships, we come into phase number 2, which is the cannon phase. That's right, it's time for us to load up them cannons and fire at each other. The way we see who goes first is to figure out who have the most sails. The one who have the most amount of sails is the one that gets to fire first. And if you have no sails, well, you don't get to fire at all, so make sure that you have at least 1. If there is a tie between 2 players and their sails that, let's say, they have the same amount, well, these 2 players will have to re-roll their sails dices to see who gets the most amount of sails during that round and get to go first. Now that we know that this player has the most sails, we need to figure out who he wants to fire at. The way we do this is that you simply assign dices to the player you want to fire at. So I take these 2 for example, and I say I want to fire at this player. Well, I simply roll the dices and figure out what I get. I get 1 crew symbol and a ship symbol. With the ship symbol, you can choose if you want to hit the sails or the hull. And with the crew symbol, well, you hit the crew. The last dice is of course to the second player. So I roll this one as well. And again, I get a ship. And can also choose to hit either that player's hull or sails. I could have rolled all 3 dices on 1 player, but I chose to separate it and hit 1 each. Now, if I would have gotten the parrot, I could actually have chosen which part of their ship I hit. Once you have finished firing your cannons, you simply remove the pieces of the ship of the opponent that you hit. Remember that I could have chosen to remove either the sails or the hull, but I wanted to pick down this player's speed, and I removed those 2 pieces until the refitting phase. Now we enter phase number 3, the boarding phase. To board another ship might sound kind of pleasant, but in this game it's really not, because this is the part where a player can board the other player's ship and steal their treasures. Again, the player with the most sails get to go first. And if this player decides to attack this player, they need to roll their ship dices. The attacker starts by rolling their ship dices and see how many ships they get. If they manage to get more ships than the defender, which they did, they get to board their ship. We have managed to successfully board another ship, and now we need to figure out who wins the fight. The way we do this is that each player that is involved in this battle takes their crew dices and roll them. Depending on what symbol you get, you will get different kinds of scores. If you get a parrot, like I did here for example, you get 3 points. If you get a ship, you get 0 points. If you get a sword, you get 1 point. And if you get a cannon, you get 2 points. The player with the highest amount of points wins the fight. The crew that loses the attack also loses a crew die. Now the attacker might choose to attack again. And if the player ends up with having no crew dice, that player that attacks gets to steal 1 treasure from that player. Once we have finished boarding other people's ships and have dried our blood from our swords, it's time to start to loot Parrot Island. The way we do this is again the player with the fastest ship gets to loot first. But remember, you can only carry as much loot as your ship can carry, the amount of hull you have in your ship. So if you only have 1 hull, well, you can only carry 1 treasure. But if you have 3 hull, you could carry 3 treasures. If 2 players have the same amount of speed, you have some different choices. You can choose to battle. Again, you go into melee battle to see who wins and gets to take the treasure home. Or you could simply just parley and just gentlemanly let the other player go first, which is kind of boring, right? Or you could also negotiate. Maybe you take 1 treasure, I take 1 treasure, and we split it up like gentlemen. If a ship ends up having no crew at the end of the looting phase, they get the pleasure of getting all the skull dices from Isla de la Morta. But if 2 ships have no crew at the end of the looting phase, they split up the dices. In phase number 5, we get to repair our ship and re-roll the dices that was hit and left outside of our ship to bring them back and rebuild our hull, for example, or sails or crew. We also get to re-roll any dice that are still a part of our ship if we want to change them. So now we're at phase number 6 in this game, and it's time to figure out the scoring. If a ship had reached the X on the spot, that person would have won the game, but nobody is there yet. So let's count the coins. We have 2 plus 2 plus 2 coins on this ship, giving this player 6 coins. Which means that this ship can move 6 spaces. The amount of coins you have is the amount of coins you can move. But the other ships have received a Scurvy Dice, the one with the skull. So they actually have to move 1 step back. The amount of coins you get is the amount of steps you move. The amount of skulls you have is the amount of steps you need to move back. The player to first hit the X on the map on Monkey Grove is the winner of the game. If nobody have won the game yet, well, the game just resets and starts over again from phase number 1 until someone eventually hits the X on the spot and wins the game. So there you have it, people. That was Scurvy Dice for you from Firelock Games. 2 to 4 players, about 15 to 30 minutes. It's a quite quick, easy, small little game where you get to throw some cool dices and see if you can hit your fellow opponent's shit, or maybe even board them to steal their treasures. If you want to check this out, there's a link down here to Firelock Games in the description. And take a look for yourself and see what you think. If you like this video, please hit a comment down in the selection here and tell me what you thought about this game. Did you like the artwork? Did you like the game? Are you gonna check it out? Well, tell me about it. If you want to see more of my videos, please hit the subscribe button down here. And I'll see you next week. And until then, take care and spread some love, please.